I wasn't meant to hear it, but I did. It was supposed to be just another night at my in-laws' house. Predictable, dull, the same forced smiles and rehearsed conversations that made us all pretend we were the perfect family. I had stepped out of the kitchen, water glass in hand, making my way back to the living room when I heard my wife's voice. Low, hushed, the kind of tone you use when you don't want to be overheard. Asterisk, he's a joke in bed, Mom. I swear I have to fake it every time. Asterisk, then came the laughter. Not just hers, but my mother-in-law's. A sharp, knowing chuckle, the kind that made my stomach twist. This wasn't just amusement. There was something else in it. Ridicule, mockery, a condescending sort of amusement, like this was some inside joke between them. I froze mid-step. The glass in my hand suddenly felt like dead weight, the room around me fading into a dull hum as those words settled over me like thick, suffocating air. I should have walked in right then and there, demanded an explanation, forced them to confront what they had just said. But I didn't, not because I was afraid of an argument, but because I knew, deep down, that this moment was bigger than just a fight. This was the kind of moment that changes things. The kind you don't come back from. "Oh, honey, that's just how men are," my mother-in-law said, dismissive, as if I were some unfortunate burden her daughter had to tolerate. Asterisk, at least he's good for other things, right? Asterisk, another laugh, another dagger to the chest. I had never given much thought to my mother-in-law's opinion of me. She had always been a little distant, a little cold, but I had chalked it up to her personality. I never thought it mattered. I hadn't married her. But standing there, invisible to them, hearing them talk about me like I was nothing more than a disappointing obligation, like I was something to be pitied, it hit me. This wasn't a careless joke. This was how they saw me. Less than. Something shifted inside me. Something quiet but undeniable. My marriage, the one I had fought for, invested in, believed in, suddenly felt like a lie. A story I had been telling myself while she had been living a different one. I backed away, moving silently toward the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I set the glass of water down on the counter, my hands steady even though my mind was anything but. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror, blank expression, but beneath it, a storm. How long had she felt this way? Had it always been like this? I started replaying moments in my mind, little things I had brushed off over the years. The nights she turned away without a word, the way she sighed, impatient, when I reached for her. The eye rolls I had told myself were just exhaustion, just stress. Had I been blind? Or had she always made it this obvious, assuming I would never see it for what it was? Asterisk, a joke. Asterisk, that was the word that stuck. Not heartbreak, not devastation, just clarity. I wasn't shattered. I wasn't broken. I was just done. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. There was no need to burst out of the bathroom, no need for a dramatic confrontation. Not yet, because this wasn't about that one moment. It was about everything. For the first time in a long time, I saw my marriage for what it truly was. And I knew things were about to change. When I walked back into the living room, they were still there, still laughing, still sipping their wine as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just ripped apart the man sitting across from them. My wife glanced at me, a brief, unreadable flicker of acknowledgement before she turned back to her mother, unconcerned, unbothered. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look worried that I might have overheard, because in her mind, I was never even a possibility. That was what hit the hardest. She was so sure I was oblivious, so sure that I would never catch on, that I would never hear, never understand. But I did, and suddenly, I saw everything I had ignored for years. The way her mother spoke about me, always with subtle condescension. The way my wife never defended me, never pushed back, just laughed along, agreeing with every comment that chipped away at my worth. The drive home was silent. She scrolled through her phone, letting out the occasional laugh, completely indifferent to the man sitting beside her. And for the first time, I understood that silence for what it truly was. Not comfort, not familiarity. Indifference. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't glance at me. Didn't even notice the weight of what had changed between us. And that told me everything I needed to know. When we got home, she went through her usual routine, changing into her oversized t-shirt, settling into bed with her phone in hand, absorbed in some other world that didn't include me. I had seen it 100 times before, but tonight, I wasn't just watching. I was understanding. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at her, not with love, not with anger, just clarity. Asterisk, did you have a good time tonight? Asterisk, I asked. She barely looked up. Asterisk, yeah, it was nice. Asterisk, nice. I nodded, staring at the floor for a moment. Then I asked something I had never asked before. Something so simple, yet so heavy. Asterisk, do you respect me? Asterisk, that made her pause. Her fingers stilled on the screen. Finally, she looked up, confused, not guilty, not worried, just confused, like the question itself was absurd. Asterisk, what? Asterisk, she let out a short, humorless laugh. Asterisk, what kind of question is that? Asterisk, asterisk, a serious one. Asterisk, her brows furrowed. Asterisk, of course. Asterisk, but I saw it now, the truth, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to face it. I didn't laugh. I didn't smirk. I didn't do anything but watch her, my eyes steady, unreadable. She shifted, her fingers tightening slightly around her phone as she let out another short, forced chuckle. You're being weird, she said, shaking her head. What are you even talking about? I let the silence stretch between us, let it press down on her, unrelenting. I had always been one to fill those silences, to rush in with reassurances, to bridge the gap before she even had to notice it was there. But not this time. This time, I let her feel it. Her eyes darted away, toward the TV, toward anything but me. Seriously, she said, voice thinner now. What is this about? I leaned back, exhaling slowly, dragging the moment out. I could see the edges of her confidence fraying, the cracks forming in the foundation she had so carefully built, the one where I was a predictable, steady, oblivious husband, the one where she thought she could say whatever she wanted behind my back, and I would never, could never, do anything about it. You said I was a joke. I finally said, my voice quiet but firm, that you fake it every time. The color drained from her face. Just for a second, just long enough for me to know she knew exactly what I was talking about. And then, just as quickly, the mask slipped back into place. Oh my God, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. That was just... She waved a hand like she was swatting at an invisible fly. Stupid girl talk. It didn't mean anything. You're really going to get upset over that. I tilted my head slightly, studying her. I'm not upset, I said simply. And I wasn't. That was the part she didn't understand yet. That was the part that scared her. If I had yelled, if I had fought, if I had tried to make her feel guilty, she would have known how to handle that. She would have dismissed it, turned around, made me feel like I was the one being irrational. But I wasn't giving her that. I was giving her something far worse. Indifference. I watched as she crossed her arms, as she tried to maintain her usual air of superiority. But there was a nervous energy beneath it now, a flicker of something close to fear. You're overreacting, she muttered, shifting in her seat. I mean, come on, you know how my mom is. We were just talking. It wasn't serious. I nodded, slow and deliberate. You're right, I said. She blinked. That wasn't the reaction she had been expecting. Wait, what? You're right, I repeated. It wasn't serious. Not for you. I let that sink in, watched the way her throat bobbed as she swallowed. But for me, I continued, it was the moment I realized I was done. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. Not the kind that came from two people at ease with each other. No, this was different. This was the kind of silence that came when the ground beneath you shifted, when you suddenly realized you were standing in unfamiliar territory. I stood up, stretching slightly like I had all the time in the world. You don't have to explain yourself, I told her. You don't have to apologize. Honestly, I don't even want you to. I grabbed my jacket, slipping it on as I made my way toward the door. Where are you going? She asked, her voice sharp, the first real trace of panic bleeding through. I glanced over my shoulder, offering her a small, almost amused smile. Out! And with that, I walked out the door, leaving her sitting there, her phone forgotten in her lap, her world shifting in ways she never saw coming. She didn't move. Not at first. She just sat there, staring at the email on my phone screen, as if sheer disbelief could erase what she was seeing. I watched as her fingers tensed around the device, gripping it too tightly, her breathing becoming uneven. She wasn't used to this, wasn't used to me being the one in control. You actually did this, she whispered, her voice unsteady, as if she still couldn't believe it. I nodded. Yeah. Her eyes darted up to meet mine, and for the first time in years, I saw something new in them. Not indifference, not amusement at my expense, not even anger. No, what I saw was fear. But even then, she tried to fight it, tried to hold on to the version of me she thought she knew. The one who would back down, who would second-guess himself, who would let her words twist reality until I was apologizing instead. So that's it? She said, her voice sharpening as she forced herself into anger. You're just leaving? Over something this stupid? I let out a small breath, not quite a laugh, but something close. See, that's exactly the problem, I said, tilting my head slightly. You still think this is about one conversation, one joke, one night. She crossed her arms, her whole body tense. Because it was, she snapped. It wasn't some deep, serious thing. I was just venting. It was girl talk. It didn't mean anything. I stared at her, taking in every word, every tiny flicker of emotion crossing her face. Not to you, I said simply, but it meant something to me. She scoffed, rolling her eyes, but there was a tightness in her expression now, a crack forming in the mask she usually wore. Come on, she muttered, shaking her head. You're really this upset over something I said in private? Private? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. You weren't alone. You were with your mother, laughing, mocking me. Do you even realize how easy that was for you? How natural. It wasn't some slip-up, wasn't a mistake. It's how you really see me. She pressed her lips together, her fingers digging into her arms where they were crossed. I sighed, running a hand down my face before continuing. I used to brush it off. The little digs, the dismissive looks, the times you rolled your eyes when I talked about something I cared about. I told myself it was just stress, just marriage, just normal. I let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. But it's not. Marriage is supposed to be built on respect. And I see now that you don't respect me. Maybe you never did. She blinked rapidly, her breathing shallow. That's not true, she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. Then prove it, I said. Tell me when. When have you made me feel respected? When have you supported me the way I've supported you? When have you made me feel like I was anything more than an obligation? She opened her mouth, but no words came out, because she had none. I nodded slowly, more to myself than to her. Yeah, that's what I thought. I stood up, stretching slightly, feeling lighter than I had in years. It was strange, this feeling, not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. I don't hate you, I said, my voice steady, but I also don't love you. Not in the way a husband should love his wife, and definitely not in the way a man should love someone who doesn't respect him. Her chest rose and fell too quickly now, panic creeping into her expression. Wait. I already made arrangements, I continued, pulling my phone from my pocket and placing it on the table between us. The email was still open, the lease to my new apartment, signed, finalized. Her lips parted, her face draining of color. You planned this? I nodded. Yeah, a while ago. That's when the panic truly set in. I could see it in the way her fingers twitched, in the way she swallowed hard, in the way she looked at me like I was suddenly a stranger. She had spent years believing she had all the power in this relationship, believing she could say and do whatever she wanted, and that I would always be there, always willing to forgive, always willing to chase after her. She was wrong. Wait, she said again, but this time her voice cracked. I glanced around the living room, the place that had been ours, but had never really felt like home. The place where I had spent years trying, waiting, hoping she would meet me halfway. But I was done waiting. "You'll be fine," I said softly, stepping back toward the door. "You always are." She didn't move, didn't call out my name, didn't try to stop me, because for the first time, she didn't know how. And for the first time, I didn't care. I turned the doorknob, stepped outside, and closed the door behind me. Finally free, she stood there, frozen, as if trying to process the weight of what was happening. Her eyes darted across my face, searching for something. Hesitation, doubt, a crack in my resolve. But there was nothing left for her to find. "You're serious," she said, her voice unsteady. It wasn't a question. Completely. A slow breath left her lips, her shoulders sinking just slightly, realization setting in. "You don't love me anymore." I shook my head. No. She didn't react right away. No outburst, no tears, no dramatic pleading. A part of me had expected her to put on some kind of show, to at least try to manipulate the moment like she always did. But instead, she just sat there, staring at me, processing the fact that this wasn't just another one of our fights. This wasn't a moment that would pass after a few days of cold silence followed by forced reconciliation. This was different, because I was already gone. The weight of it all pressed down on her, and for the first time since I had met her, she looked small, not in a pitiful way, not in a way that made me feel sorry for her. Just small, like someone who had spent her entire life believing she was the one in control, only to realize too late that she never truly was. I picked up my phone from the table, slipping it into my pocket without another glance. Then, without hesitation, I turned and walked toward the bedroom. I felt her eyes on me as I moved, but she didn't say a word, not when I opened the closet and pulled out the bag I had packed days ago, not when I picked up my keys, not when I turned toward the door. I stopped just short of leaving, looking back at her one last time. "I hope you find whatever it is you actually want," I said, and I meant it. She didn't respond. I turned the doorknob, stepped outside, and let the door close behind me. Just like that, it was over. There's something surreal about walking away from a life you once thought was permanent. I had spent so many years believing this was where I was meant to be, that this was how love was supposed to feel, like a constant uphill battle, like something that needed to be earned. But the moment I stepped outside, the moment the cold air hit my face, I realized how wrong I had been. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt light. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of trying to prove my worth to someone who had never valued it in the first place. I didn't have to explain myself anymore. I didn't have to wonder if I was good enough. I didn't have to try. And that realization, it was liberating. My new apartment was nothing special, just a small one-bedroom with bare walls and minimal furniture. But when I walked inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. There was no tension lingering in the air. No silent judgments. No walking on eggshells, second-guessing every word, every action, wondering if I was doing something wrong. Just silence. Just freedom. That first night, I sat on my new couch with a beer in hand, staring out the window at the city lights. And I thought about everything. About how much time I had wasted. About how many years I had spent shrinking myself down, making myself smaller to fit into a life that was never meant for me. And then I stopped thinking, because the past didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what came next. The funny thing about letting go is that once you do, you realize how easy it actually is. You spend so much time clinging to something because you think you need it, because you convince yourself that without it, you'll fall apart. But then you let go, and you don't fall apart. You breathe, you move forward, and you never look back. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.